So thank you for joining us for our Community Business Workshop, Building an Empowering Team. The Community Business Workshop is made possible with the generous support of MUFG Union Bank. The Community Business Workshop series is a collaboration between the Polsky Exchange, the IG Clinic on Entrepreneurship, and the University of Chicago Office of Civic Engagement. The goal of the series is to provide Southside businesses and entrepreneurs with substantive and actionable programming to grow and sustain their business. For today's workshop, it will provide an overview of how to create a positive environment for your team that produces effective results. By the end of this workshop, you will have access to a framework which includes considerations for designing a team, how to create effective teams, and addressing potential areas of conflict. I would like to introduce our speaker, Awatif Yahya. Awatif is the founder of Awe Horizons LLC, a company offering leadership workshops and consultancy services to business managers and entrepreneurs. Awatif is passionate about empowering small businesses with the necessary tools to create productive and healthy workplaces. Some housekeeping items. If you have questions, please enter it in the chat box on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Once we wrap up the webinar, we will leave some time to answer your questions. With that being said, let's begin.
I'm sorry, guys, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Sorry, there was something wrong with my connection here, so apologies for that. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Building Empowering Teams webinar. My name is Awatif, and I'm the founder of Awe Horizons LLC. We advocate leadership skills and leadership development. We define leadership in three main pillars: people leadership, business leadership, and strategic leadership. Obviously, today's webinar falls under the people leadership pillar. In terms of our agenda today, we're going to start by defining working groups versus teams. Sometimes people use these terms interchangeably, so we'll differentiate between the two. We'll talk about why teams are important and why organizations put them together, the considerations we need to make for designing an empowering and effective team. Then we're going to cover 4 different types of teams. We're going to talk about team size, and then I'm going to break and we're going to do a little exercise together. I'd like to keep this webinar as interactive as possible. So this is, the exercise will be the time where we practice that interaction and see if we can apply the knowledge in a particular scenario that we're gonna work on together. We're gonna talk about team conflicts and virtual teams, and then we'll have a wrap up and Q&A at the end. I'd like to let you know here that building effective teams is a big task. We won't be able to address all aspects of it today in this 60-minute time we have together. However, this agenda is actually part of bigger, full-fledged a full day agenda for building teams. So just know that you'll walk away today with some knowledge to take away and start implementing directly within your teams. But know that the whole process of building effective teams is a big process, and it needs time to make sure that you have all the key elements together. Some ground rules. I am here for you, so I ask you to please be present and interactive. As Isra said, you can use the Q&A chat boxes, and we will have the opportunity to interact together as a group when we're doing the exercise. It's a safe place, so there's no negativity or judgment. There's no wrong questions, so feel free to ask whatever you have. And on the last point there, this is an introduction to knowledge, but knowledge is nothing without action. So I would please encourage you to take whatever learnings you have from today and apply them within your team. Okay, so let's start defining what are working groups and how different they are from teams. Let's start with working groups first of all. So a working group is defined as a group that consists of people who share ideas and learn from one another, but they do not have interdependency, so they're not interdependent. They do not work towards a shared goal, nor hold themselves mutually accountable. So a good example of a working group would be community groups, or associations or professional networking groups. So if we take, for example, a marketing association, every member of that association will share the same marketing ideas. They will learn from one another, but each member of that working group would have their own goals, and they won't hold each other or the other members of the group accountable to those goals. Okay, so they just a part of that working group merely just to share ideas and learn from one another. So that's a working group. A team, on the other hand, has specific characteristics. So first of all, they do have a shared goal, and teams have interdependency. So in order for them to be successful and deliver upon their objective, members have to depend on each other to complete certain tasks for the whole team to be successful. So there's interdependency there. Membership is bound over a specific period of time. So teams are not permanent entities. They are formed, dismantled, and reformed. And this can happen naturally through succession plans. People leave teams, people join teams. So typically the period of a particular team to be working together is between 1 and 2 years. If you happen to be working in a project that would take longer than 2 years, then it is advisable to have rotating team members. By doing so, you'll make sure that you keep energy levels high and that you have fresh ideas coming in. Another fact about teams is that the members have authority to manage their own work and the process of how they deliver their work. They draw upon resources from outside the team and vice versa. And teams typically operate in large social systems, such as an organization. Last but not least, teams are advisable to have some sort of a team charter. So a team charter is where they will decide how they're going to operate as a team. What are the roles and responsibilities? What do they do when they have a conflict? How do they report completion of tasks to one another, and what have you? So that team charter doesn't necessarily have to be written down, but it's more of a code of conduct and an understanding of how the team will interact with one another and operate properly. Now, it's very important to differentiate working groups and teams, and I hope this definition is clear to you. I have seen some organizations where they claim that they are actually working in teams, but when you look at the way they operate, you will see that they're working in silos within a group. So it is different than a team composition. Right, so let's dig into why do we have teams, or why do organizations put teams together? Well, first and foremost, they tap into different skill sets and experiences from the different members of the team, which in turn improves productivity, the customer service. Also, the different members, from their skills and their experiences, they would encourage innovation within the team. And they will have a motivation for achievement, because remember, when we talked about teams and defining teams, we talked about that interdependency within them. So they will push one another to actually complete the task, and the organization will have the commitment and ownership for the work that's being delivered. Teams also can drive for diversity and global view, especially when you have teams that are not bound to a physical location or to a geography. So it's important to notice or to realize here that a team is really a state of mind, and it's not bound to a particular location, physical location. You can have teams in different parts of the organization, different departments, different buildings, or even geographically. And that geographical spread is what brings that global view and helps the organization get competitive advantage. So these are just some of the reasons why organizations would want to put teams together rather than having people work in silos. And for these reasons, it really pays off to have or to design an effective team from the very beginning so that you avoid potential hurdles in the future. So let's talk about certain considerations you need to make before you put a team together. And again, we're just going to go through some of the questions here that you might want to ask yourself before you start composing a team, okay? And this is not a complete list by all means, but it definitely has aspects. And if you know the answers to these questions, it will help you understand what type of team you want to create and what kind of caliber or what team members you want to have in this team. So the first question is, well, what work needs to be done? What is the scope and what's the focus of that work? Is the goal really clearly defined, and can the team articulate that goal? How much authority do you want to give the team, or should the team be allowed to have? So that's an important question to then understand what kind of team you're going to design. What is the degree of task interdependency among the team members? Number 5, are the team members' interests perfectly aligned? Are they opposing, or do you have a mix in nature? How big should your team be? Will time pressure be good for the team or not so good for the team? Again, answering these questions will help you decide what kind of team you're going to put together. And then finally, is there a correct solution that should be readily demonstrated and communicated to team members for them to execute? So again, these are just some of the questions you should be asking yourself before putting a team together. And it's not a complete list. I'm sure there are many more questions you can ask, but these are the basics that would help you. Sorry about the noise, guys, if you're hearing any noise there. Right, so let's talk about various team types. And I understand this is a busy slide, but we're gonna go through it, so no worries, okay? There are 4 main team types. You have manager-led teams, you have self-managing teams, self-directing teams, and self-governing teams. So let's go and talk about each team type separately. Starting with the manager-led teams. In these kind of teams, you have a manager. The manager acts as a leader of the team, and he or she would be responsible for defining the goals for the team as well as functioning methods. So how are the team going to execute on those goals? The team members themselves, they are only responsible for the execution of the assigned tasks. So they don't set the goal, they don't set the methods, they just execute what the leader of the team instructs them to do. So a good example of manager-led teams are military or surgical teams or automobile assembly teams. In these kind of teams, this is a perfect type of a team setting that would work for their work. In terms of insights, in manager-led teams, the manager has full control and and can be highly efficient then, because they know exactly what the goals are and how the goals are going to be achieved. But on the flip side, the members might have less autonomy, which might lead to low engagement. So knowing the positive and the negative will help you mitigate when you are designing or when you're selecting this type of a team. The next type of a team is a self-managing team. In a self-managing team, the manager defines the overall goal, but the team members have the liberty to manage the methods in which to achieve the goal or how to execute that goal. And this is the most common team type out there. It can be applied to managerial task forces, executive research committees, and what have you. This is the standard kind of a team type that most companies use to design their teams. So in self-managing teams, the manager has less control over the products and the process. So it can be a little bit difficult to assess progress. And that's why when you are selecting people to be part of self-managing teams, you need to select a certain caliber of people who are responsible and accountable on their own deliverables. And the advantage of having self-managing team is that you'll have high morale, productivity, and commitment because the team are given that autonomy to deliver the task or to achieve the goals the way they see fit. Next, you have self-directing teams. And in self-directing teams, the members determine their own goals and the methods to achieve those goals. But the managers of those teams are responsible for the team's organizational context. So basically, how does this team fit within the entire organization? What's its relationship in terms of the other teams? That's what the managers of these teams do. But the members themselves, they can set their own goals as well as executing or the process that they will choose to execute or achieve those goals. So the self-directing teams is best suited for complex or ambiguous problems and next generation planning because this kind of team type offers the most potential for innovation and, you know, achieving great accomplishment. And there's a lot of creativity that comes with these teams. On the flip side of that is self-directing teams can be extremely time-consuming to put together. It could be hard to monitor, and it can create some conflict as well because it's very highly creative type of a team, and everyone wants to compete for their ideas. So it can create conflict as well. Last but not least, you have self-governing teams. So in self-governing teams, these teams are responsible for everything, from designing to the organizational context to managing the performance and executing the task itself. So a good example of this would be your board of directors. They would be operating under self-governing teams. So the advantage is that you have extreme and full control and responsibility of everything. But on the flip side, these kind of teams can seem intimidating for employees. And again, I'm pointing out here the positive or the advantage and disadvantage because people who are in these type of teams need to pay attention and be a little bit mindful of the impact they might be generating. So by knowing the impact, they can mitigate through that and through the feelings that they might be generating within their team types. So those are the 14 types, and organizations are not confined to one particular design for their teams. They can actually use a mixture of these teams. So let me give you an example. If you're having a sales or marketing team, then the best team type might be the manager-led teams, the first one there, because you have set goals, sales targets, and you just need everyone in the team to just go ahead and execute those targets, right? As an example. If you have an R&D or research and development team, then a self-directing team might be a best suited team design for them because you want that innovation to flow and you want to give them the autonomy and the freedom to create and innovate. So I hope that's clear. So today, for today's purpose, we're really going to focus on the self-managing team because these are the most common teams, okay? Right. For self-managing teams, there are certain criteria for them to become successful. First of all, the type of people that you will invite to become members of self-managing team would be the type of caliber that's highly motivated by the work itself. They have a drive for perfection, and they have pride in producing the high quality products and services that they are that they're responsible for within their team. So this is the kind of caliber that would be a good fit for self-managing teams. So, and in order for them to be successful, they need to have a clear direction. They need to have SMART goals, and SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, or basically stretched goals. So we're not going to have time to go through the details of what SMART goals look like today, but please go ahead and Google them, and that's what it stands for. They stand for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. The tasks within the self-managing teams, they have to have a collective responsibility. So again, they depend on each other to complete the tasks in order for them to be successful. They should have basic resources. So by basic material resources, I mean money, time, tools, people. They need all those resources to become successful. The authority for these type of teams is really up to them. So they have the authority to manage the work, schedule training, manage the vacations, as well as the performance of their team as a whole. They should operate, or they do have to have some sort of a team code of conduct, or a team charter, like I discussed before. And this is just so that they know how to escalate problems, or control the process, what are their strengths, and how they're going to communicate among each other. So just some sort of a code of conduct that they all have to agree on. The rewards for self-managing teams, they have to be team-specific, right? Rewards. So when you're generating self-managing teams and you want to reward the team, then you're rewarding the team as a whole rather than individuals of that team. And then last but not least, self-managing teams need to have some free time in order to be successful. So a lot of companies are having, or they're implementing free time policy. A good example of this is Google. They have the 20% free time, which means, or which translates to 1 day every week. Google employees can go ahead and work on projects that they're passionate about. It doesn't have to be directly what they're working on, but just time for them to be creative and innovative. So they have a specific policy to allow their employees to become, or to allow their team members for self-managing teams to become creative. 3M also has the same kind of free time policy. And what else? Yeah, Genentech as well has a similar setup. So basically, whatever the policy is, you have to allow some flexibility for the teams to think and be creative. Okay, how big should the team be? So a lot of people ask this question, and there is a formula. And this is the formula. So whatever number, whatever N is, and whatever number you want to assign to a particular team, or number of people you want to assign to a team, you need to apply this formula. So N to the power of N minus N divided by N. So let's say, for example, if you want to form a team together and you want to put 5 members in this particular team, if you follow this formula, you will find that you actually be more effective with only 4 team members rather than 5. So use this formula to just gauge whether you have the right number of people within your team. Whatever it is, the model team size is always fewer than 10 people. And again, this depends really, it's from organization to organization. These are just guidelines. It's just easier to have fewer than 10 people to create working team dynamics and have that flexibility and communication levels that work well. But again, it's a guideline. It varies from a person to person. But this is a good formula to use if you want to decide or you want to see how to design and how many members your team should have. All right, so I have been talking a lot, so I'm gonna take a pause here and we're gonna go into an exercise. So I'll let you read a particular business scenario, and then we're gonna have 2 questions to see what you would do in this particular scenario. So I'm gonna pause here for a minute and let you read the scenario. This is the scenario here, and we'll go through it in a minute. So please take time to read the couple of paragraphs here. Right, so let's go through this scenario quickly together. So in this scenario, you have Elizabeth. Elizabeth has recently been promoted to the position of project manager for a high-profile project. She had worked hard to earn this promotion, and the project itself is highly visible. Success would potentially help advance the careers of all involved. She has been assigned a new team just 2 weeks into her role. Her team members are dispersed in the USA, China, Belgium, and Ghana. Most of the team members are part of multiple project teams with competing priorities to accomplishing the work of the project that Elizabeth is leading. So this is the situation here. So if I ask you to put yourself in Elizabeth's shoes, and let's go ahead and launch our first poll here. We can go ahead and launch that poll. Here we go. So allow me to just go through these options for the poll before you select an option. So what would be the first thing you would recommend Elizabeth do? If this is the situation, the scenario that she finds herself in. First, do you develop work templates to manage the team? Do you ask for a dedicated local team? Because as you can see, the team is dispersed over multiple continents, actually. Do you schedule one-on-one meetings with the individual team members? Do you schedule a video call with all team members? Do you just get the team members to figure it out themselves, or do you study the profiles and backgrounds of individual team members? So if you were Elizabeth, what would you recommend her to do? Take a moment to complete the poll. All right, shall we go ahead, Isra? Let's go ahead and end the poll. I'm assuming everyone is there. Let's see what the results are. Perfect. So I'm glad that nobody selected the option to let the team figure it out. So there's no takers there. That's great. And this group is great. Actually, the most of you said that they will study the profiles and backgrounds of the team members before anything. So that's exactly correct. That's what I would have picked too. When you are assigned a new team, the first thing you need to do is just get to know them a little bit better before you interact or do anything else. You know, I would, the next option there, 30% of you said they will schedule one-to-one meetings with the individual team members. That is absolutely the next thing I would do. And then I will go ahead into, okay, you know, now that I know who the team members are, I've studied their profiles, I've talked to them on one-on-one basis, and then you can go ahead and do the other things that I suggested there, such as putting, you know, encouraging everyone or inviting everyone to go into a video call, start to put templates together for you to be able to do the work together and communicate with one another and what have you. So this poll, you guys are spot on. So let's launch the next poll now, next question, just to see where we are. Isra, if we can launch the second poll, please. Perfect. So how can Elizabeth develop an atmosphere of trust and collaboration? So how can her team members stay visible to one another? And again, if you remember, they're dispersed in different continents. So the options here to schedule mandated meetings for the team members, to share everyone's work on the project, to split the workload so team depends on each other for their deliverable, ask the team what they want, or do all the above. So take a moment here to think about your response and please select one. Okay, we're seeing some responses come in. So Isra, we can go ahead and stop this poll now and see what people say. You guys are on top of it. This is perfect. You would need to do all of this stuff. You know, so obviously you need to schedule some mandated. First of all, I would ask them, actually. That's the first thing I would do, just to see how the team would like to communicate with one another and collaborate. So asking them, you know, scheduling mandated meetings is important. You know, the team members can obviously schedule one-on-ones as well, but to make sure that the task is delivered, they need to have some set mandated team meetings that take in place. It is also advisable that team members should share what each other is doing, so everyone is aware of the individual tasks that they are assigned, and obviously split the workload so that not one member is overwhelmed. But yeah, we can go ahead and stop this poll now. You guys are on top of it, so let's carry on here with our the remaining presentation. All right, let's talk quickly about conflict. First and foremost, conflict will happen, but it doesn't have to be so detrimental that kills the relationships within the teams or just causes some difficulties or insensitivities. So basically, you know, they happen. We will talk about how to mitigate some conflict in the next slide. But let's start by defining the 3 types of conflict. Knowing the 3 types will help you mitigate the conflicts within the teams. So the first one is a relational conflict. A relational conflict is a disagreement based on personal and social issues that have nothing to do with the work, okay? So this type of conflict is known as emotional or an A-type conflict. It's got nothing to do with the work. People's personalities just clash, and therefore you have a conflict. So that's the first step there. The second type is a task conflict. So a task conflict is a disagreement about the work that's being done within a team. And this conflict is known as a cognitive or a type C conflict. And then the last one is process conflict. So this is a disagreement on the task strategy, delegation of duties, resources, maybe timing. So it's just the process that you're going to be taking to complete the task. The first one there, the relational conflict, this is the one that hopefully we eliminate or try and eliminate mostly, because it's very, it's rooted in anger and can become very resentful and defensive as well. So it is important to know your team members so you can mitigate these conflicts. And for you yourself as well, if you are a member of a team and suddenly there's a conflict, stop yourself and ask yourself, what is the root of my conflict? Is this because it's a relational based conflict? Is it because I'm not in agreement with the task, or is it a process related conflict? Knowing the type of conflict you are falling in will help you mitigate or try and dissolve that conflict. So there are guidelines to handling team conflicts, which we're going to go through right now. But before we address those, I just want to point out two main things. First and foremost, conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, some conflict can be good because it can lead to innovation in ideas. It can increase accuracy, just making sure that everyone is getting the correct numbers or what have you. And it can also lead to a better decision making, okay? So the perception that every conflict is a bad conflict is not true. It's just how you handle the conflict. So I would encourage team members to invite or embrace some of this conflict and get to understand the root cause of the conflict in order to address it, rather than brushing it away. So that's one point. The second point I wanted to bring is that a lot of companies or a lot of teams, when they are faced with conflict, the first thing they want to do is go for a retreat or go for a team retreat. That team retreats are not for resolving conflicts. Team retreats are good for building mutual trust, enhancing the interpersonal relationships, and certainly for celebrating success. But team activities and retreats are not the best thing to do when you are trying to resolve conflicts. The best way to resolve conflicts is to understand the root cause of the conflict. First of all, determine what type of conflict it is, and then follow some of these guidelines to mitigate that conflict. So let's go through some of these. The first and foremost is maintaining good working relationships should be the primary goal. So you can have a conflict, but you don't have to let it really affect the relationship of the team you don't have to let the conflict affect the relationship with your members in the team. Sometimes you need to agree to disagree, okay? And maybe you need to create a culture where disagreement is okay. Now, I'm not saying agree to everything. If you have a conflict, if it's a task conflict or a process conflict, raise your issue that you have. But once the team decides on a certain path, either through a voting or once the team mutually agrees to go down a certain path, and that path is not what you would have liked, you have to go with the team, because that's the mutual decision of the team. And remember, we said the team is a working unit, right? They have interdependencies. So the worst thing that can happen is you have a disagreement or you have a conflict, you state your conflict, and the team mutually agree. Maybe you do a vote, and the team mutually agrees to go with a different suggestion or a different way of doing things. And then you come out and say, well, that's not the way I would like it to be done, and you're always posing this conflict for the team. So that's not the right way of doing things. If say you decide on a particular path to go down, and if things don't work, have another meeting, have another discussion, and talk about these different ways of doing things. But once you agree to disagree, and once you park it, make sure that it's actually parked and you move together as a unit within the team. Pay attention to disagreements that are unsaid. So an example of this is the eye rolling, the body language, basically, the eye rolling, the facial disgust, the disbelief, silence notes. These things can be can become obstacles for the team in the future. So make sure you observe everyone's body language, and make sure that an agreement is an agreement, and it's not an agreement just to go back and backstab or tell other people that you're not in agreement with the direction the team has taken. So just make sure that you pay attention to what's said and what's not said as well. Step into the other person's shoes. So just trying to look at things from another person's point of view and perspective. Speak only for yourself. So do not assume you know the other person's position or intent. Keep your emotions in check. So it's very important to pay attention to the words you use and the actions you use, again, not to affect the relationships within the team. Ask about intent, then explain the impact. So the point here is not to assume malice or not to assume bad intent of somebody. So a good ask would be something like this. Is this what you meant to do, or is this what you meant to say, because it came across as da 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 da. So just give people the chance for a do-over if they're overstepped, and just make sure that they explain what their true intent was, right? And you explain the impact that their actions or their words have had on the others. Listen before you speak. So seek to be first understood before, seek to first to understand before being understood. And last but not least, be very careful of what you put in writing, because once you've written an angry email, when you are in the conflict mindset, you cannot undo whatever that's written. It becomes evidence forever. And so make sure that if you want to write things down to just help you structure the ideas in your mind, go ahead and do that. Make notes for yourself. But be very careful about sharing conflict or expressing conflict or disagreement in writing, just because it's going to be there forever, and it's going to be very hard to undo. Right, let's cover quickly virtual teams. Now, virtual teams we've been seeing them pop up, and they're becoming more and more popular. They're driven by global expansion, millennials, the gig economy, or like the time we find ourselves in this pandemic. So virtual teams are here to stay. And so let's talk a little bit about them. So why virtual teams? Why do companies put virtual teams together? First, cost savings. So companies can save a lot of money. In fact, some studies show that 25% of the revenue can be saved if you're implementing virtual teams. Why? Because you're saving on the office space, you're saving desk costs, reduce sick leaves, reduce transportation or travel costs. So for all those cost savings, organizations are considering virtual teams. If you want to expand your talent pool, so when companies cannot find local talent, virtual employees could be a good solution. This could help find hidden talent due to employees' inability to travel. So a good example would be pregnant women or mothers of young kids or people with disabilities. So, virtual teams could be a solution. You can tap into a talent that you have as hidden right now, and it can also increase your diversity within your organization. So that's another reason why organizations look into virtual teams. Global virtual teams give opportunities to gain competitive advantage. This is particularly for organizations that want to expand globally. They increase the life-work balance for employees because employees have a better quality of life. They reduce basically the time that's wasted to travel, for example, back and forth to work, and it reduces stress as well. So it can increase work-life balance for employees. Also, despite all the reputation about virtual teams, they actually perform better because they operate in environments where they have less distractions. We currently have the technology to be able to work from anywhere. And again, this is only applicable to certain professions. I understand not every organization can perform, virtually all the time, but we do certainly have the technology that can enable people to work remotely. So we can take advantage of that. And then last but not least, force majeure. So we find ourselves in this kind of situation right now with the pandemic. You can have earthquakes, you can have tsunamis. So in these kind of situations, virtual teams could be an answer to the problem. But in order for virtual teams to be successful, there are certain things that you have to make sure are in place in order for them to operate remotely. First, you have to make sure that they have the technology that will enable them to deliver their work remotely. So by technology, do they have the right hardware? Do they have the right camera, laptops, bandwidth? Do they have the right software to be able to basically complete their work remotely, such as Zoom, Skype? You have a lot of things right now that you can use, Slack. So ensure that your virtual teams have the right technology to be able to complete their work remotely. Next, this whole mindset about remote workers being lazy needs to be adjusted. So you need to adjust that mindset and reputation that people have about people who work remotely. More than ever, you need to track SMART goals because you don't see these people. So you have to make sure that whatever goals you have set and milestones are delivered. You have to have frequent check-ins, and please book it in your calendar. So it's not only a matter of, okay, I'm going to touch base with this person, but make sure these check-ins are intentional and you have space allocated on your calendar to touch base with your team who's working virtually. Over-communicate, because there's no such thing as over-communication when we talk about virtual teams. You don't get to see their faces, you don't get to hear their voices. So the more you communicate, the better it is for them. They need to know exactly the messages that are aimed and intended for them. try and use a buddy system. A buddy system is good so that virtual team members don't feel alone and they continue to learn from one another and share. So optimize on a buddy system if you can. Schedule opt-in morning coffee or lunchtime. So, you know, now happy hours are very common. And the reason why it's opt-in is because you really want to encourage people to maintain relationships, even though that they're working remotely, but don't enforce it, because then it becomes a hassle more than anything. Give them the option to opt out if such meetings are not convenient for them. Take time to recognize and celebrate. You do not have the water cooler discussions anymore. So make sure you recognize people and you celebrate whatever wins, big or small, that they achieve. Encourage virtual teams to set boundaries for life-work balance. Believe it or not, when you're working from home or remotely, you might actually tend to work more than less. So encourage your team to separate between their work time and their personal time. And last but not least, adopt virtual team building activities. So again, when they're working remotely, I'm not talking only about happy hour and things like that, but have some sort of card games or book or movie discussions. You can even watch a movie together. Whatever activity you bring together, you need to make sure that they continue to be engaged. All right, and I think that is the last slide we have. So I want to allow some time for Q&A. So I want to thank you all for your participation in the polls today and for your attention. And let's open it up for Q&A. Isra, do we have any questions coming in?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Awatif. That was wonderful. Okay, so we'll go with the first question. So we have a couple of questions about the formula, so going back to that.
Okay.
So first question is, would you be able to provide an example of like how you would use the formula for your team?
Okay, so the formula, the N really is whatever number you think the team should have. So basically, if you're thinking of forming a team based on one of the team types that we've discussed, and say you have, 10 amazing people that you want to be part of this team, you can use the formula to see if 10 is really the optimal number for team members. And you'd every time, whatever team member, whatever number you have in mind, the formula would reduce it. So you'll come up with a number of people because the guidelines, like I say, is to keep it to roughly 10-ish. So again, the formula is there as a guideline. If you need your teams to be of bigger size than 10, by all means do that. But the formula is just to give you a little bit room to test your numbers and just make sure that you're optimizing the number of members within a team.
Thank you. Awatif, can you go back to that slide? Because the next question is just asking about that specific formula. If you could just go back to the slide with the formula.
Let's go back. Oh, here we go. There we go.
Okay, it says, the formula equals n-1. Am I missing something? It's possible they weren't able to read it clearly.
Yeah. So basically, let's say you want to put a team together and you found these 5 amazing people that you think that work brilliant together in a team, and your starting number or your N is 5. If you put 5 to the power of 2 minus 5 divided by 5, you'll come up with 4. So your team should be 4 rather than 5. And again, it's just a guideline.
Great. So one last question regarding the formula. How do you arrive at the formula? Is it backed by research on team productivity and perception?
Yeah, so this comes from a book. Let me share, if I see if I can share. Yeah, this comes from a book called, it's the same book here. It's by Lee L. Thompson, Making the Team. So if you have some time to Google that book, so the formula was put together by research, and you know, they've come up with this formula as a guideline. So yes, you can go ahead and Google that book and look at the justification or the reasoning they used for this particular formula.
Great. So there are more questions, but just as for clarification, are you able to share your presentation slides with the guests?
Sure. I mean, I don't have a list, but I'm assuming the webinar is being recorded and everyone will get a recording of the webinar. So yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's keep going. So can you put up the last slide on virtual teams again?
Let's go there.
There's a comment that there were good polling points. They just missed the first two.
This one?
It's at the last slide on virtual teams.
Yes.
So, okay, yes. That one.
And like I said, you guys will have the recording and you have my information as well. So if there are any particular questions you might have, feel free to reach out to me later, and I'm happy to address individual questions too.
Great.
Any more questions?
We'll just give it a minute or two. I think we might be, I don't think we're going to get any more questions, but let's just give people a minute or two.
Sure. We can keep this interactive and ask people just maybe to put on the chat. What is the one lesson that they have learned from the webinar today? The one takeaway. Keeping it interactive for another couple of minutes or so until we get more questions. Go ahead and...
Awatif, are you able to see the chat?
I am just stopped my screen, so now I can see the chat.
So we got one. So your team needs to be smaller than you want it to be?
Yeah, people tend to think the bigger teams are better, but it actually creates a lot of complex situations. So the smaller the better, and use the formula whenever you need to.
It looks like we have a question. How do you get existing employees to work with new employees when the existing ones feel like they have, I'm assuming they mean like more experience, so they're more senior?
Okay, so basically the reason why the new team member has joined, there's a certain reason why they put this team member in. So maybe they have a different perspective. And remember, the team membership is typically 1 to 2 years. And then it goes into rotating just to keep the ideas fresh. So I would advise them to look at the new team member and see what they can gain from them, from this new team member. Again, when you have been in a team for a long period of time and there's a certain way of doing things, you might miss out opportunities on either innovation or different methods. So I would advise them to look at the new recruit or the new team member for opportunities to innovate and to do things differently, or even to just basically confirm that the way the team is operating is the right way. So it's a bit of a challenge just to make sure that you're doing things correctly and the team is performing at the optimum level. every resource, every team member is a resource. I would encourage them to look at that person as a resource to them rather than casting them out, you know?
Yeah, maybe like the senior team member can serve more of a mentor role as well.
As well, exactly. Bless you. Okay. Do you have anything coming up?
Nope. So we'll wrap up if we don't have any more questions coming in. Thank you guys all for joining us. Thank you especially for Awatif for taking the time to present. This is going to be super helpful for me too, as we're all working in teams remotely. So I learned a lot and this was great. So for the people who have attended, this is recorded. So once Zoom has a recording available, I will share that with you. And Awatif, I think you said if they have specific questions, they can reach out to you.
Yeah, so everyone, you guys have my email. If you don't, it'll be shared. Feel free to reach out anytime. I know as information sinks in, you might come up with questions later, so just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to assist in any way.
Great, so I'll send a follow-up email and I'll share Awatif's information. So as far as other webinars and workshops, please stay posted. So please go to polsky.uchicago.edu to see our next workshops and webinars that are coming up. It was great seeing you guys and hope you guys all have a good week. Awatif, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Goodbye. Have a good evening. Yeah. Thank you.